They thought they were getting rid of the problem. But when they fired me, the one who built everything from scratch, the code base didn't just slow down, it crumbled. Now they're calling me back, but I'm not the same man who left. I still remember the hum of the server room, low, steady, like a heartbeat. That place felt more alive than half the meetings I had to attend. But to me, it was home. I wasn't just the lead developer, I was the architect. Every function, every module, every workaround, it had a piece of me in it. When I first joined the company, it was just a handful of us packed into a shared office space. There was no handbook, no structure, just raw ideas and an insane drive to build something that actually worked. And I did. I made sense of their chaos, laid out the framework, and turned their napkin sketches into working systems. In less than a year, we had a product, clients, and enough momentum to pull in serious investors. That's when they gave me the title, Lead Developer. It felt like validation, like all those sleepless nights and bug-chasing marathons had finally meant something. People started looking to me for answers. Junior devs asked me how to structure their code, managers wanted timelines, and investors even asked for my opinion during demos. I didn't say it out loud, but deep down I thought maybe I was irreplaceable. But success has a funny way of shifting things. As the company grew, the culture changed. New hires came in, some with shiny resumes and even shinier egos. They spoke in buzzwords, brought fancy tools, and acted like we'd been building with sticks and stones. I kept telling myself it was normal, growing pains. I tried to adapt. I mentored where I could, compromised when I had to, but something felt off. Meetings got colder. My ideas started getting sidelined. I began noticing decisions being made without me in the loop. They'd smile in my face, but behind closed doors, things were moving, and I wasn't moving with them. I didn't say anything, not yet, because in my mind I still believed what I built spoke for itself, that the code would prove my worth, that loyalty mattered. But I was wrong, and soon I'd find out just how wrong. The first real crack showed up during a Monday meeting. One of those strategy alignment calls that used to be quick syncs, but had turned into endless monologues from people who barely touched the code. I joined a few minutes early, like always, with my notes ready. But when the agenda popped up on the screen, something felt off. The roadmap I'd outlined just a week ago wasn't there. Instead, a sleek new slide deck with buzzwords like agile overhaul and tech stack realignment filled the screen, and it wasn't mine. A new hire, Raj, took the lead. He was smooth, confident, and clearly trying to impress the execs. As he spoke about streamlining legacy dependencies, I realized he was talking about systems I had personally built. Systems that were still working, systems that were never mentioned as broken until now. No one asked me to speak. No one looked my way. After the call, I approached David, the CTO, and the guy who once trusted me with everything. I asked about the change. He smiled, put a hand on my shoulder, and said something like, "It's not personal, we're just exploring new perspectives. You've done great work, we just want to evolve." That word, evolve, felt like a quiet burial. Suddenly, I wasn't being looped into architecture decisions. Meetings started happening without invites. I'd walk into conversations mid-discussion, only to hear awkward silences when I showed up. Tickets were reassigned, my code comments were ignored, and once I even found my module rewritten without any version control notes. Just gone, replaced. At night, I'd lie awake wondering if I was just paranoid. Maybe this was how companies scaled. Maybe I needed to let go, but my gut kept pulling at me. It wasn't just about the code, it was about the shift in energy. The way eyes avoided mine, the way praise became scarce. They didn't say it outright, but I could feel it. I was being quietly pushed aside. And no matter how hard I worked, I couldn't stop it. Still, I held on. I told myself I could prove my worth again, fix something big, solve a problem no one else could. But instead of a challenge, what came next was blame. It started small at first, an overlooked bug here, a delayed feature there. But soon the whispers began. People started pointing fingers, and somehow my name kept coming up. Lead developer, they said, as if that title alone was enough to carry all the blame. At first, I tried to shrug it off. I knew the code base better than anyone. I knew where the weak spots were. But every time I raised concerns or offered fixes, they brushed me off or said, "We're handling it." Even when a critical feature failed during a demo, the blame circled back to me. Not because I had screwed up directly, but because, in their eyes, I was responsible for the whole ship. The tension in the office grew thick. People who once greeted me warmly now avoided eye contact. Meetings that once included me became closed-door sessions. I overheard hushed conversations and caught sidelong glances. It was as if I'd become a problem, a liability. I tried to hold my ground. I stayed late, debugging, rewriting code, documenting everything meticulously. But it was like running on a treadmill. No matter how fast I moved, I wasn't getting anywhere. The trust I'd built over years was eroding like sand slipping through fingers. Then came the first direct accusation. During a heated meeting, a project manager called out a recent bug that had cost the company a client. "This falls under the lead developer's responsibility," she said sharply. The room went silent. All eyes turned to me. My throat tightened. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but no words came out. How could I explain that the problem wasn't in my code, but in rushed features pushed without proper testing? The seed of doubt planted in others began to sprout in me. Maybe I wasn't as indispensable as I thought. Maybe I had missed something. The pride I'd carried for years started to crumble. Yet even as the blame piled on, I still believed I could fix this. I believed if I could just prove my value one more time, things would turn around. But deep down, I felt the walls closing in. And then, without warning, it happened. The day I got called into the HR office, I already had a sinking feeling. But nothing could have prepared me for how cold and clinical the whole thing was. No discussion, no chance to explain. Just a rehearsed speech about company restructuring and strategic realignment. They said it was a tough decision, one made to streamline the team and position the company for future growth. But the truth was clear. I was being shown the door. The lead developer, the one who had built the entire code base from the ground up, was now surplus to requirements. As I packed my things, every click of the keyboard, every folded notebook, felt like a nail being hammered into my pride. I kept looking around the office, memorizing the empty desk, the whiteboard full of ideas I'd sketched out just months ago. It was surreal, like watching my own story being erased. Outside, the world carried on like nothing had changed. But inside, I was crushed. The humiliation wasn't just about losing my job. It was about being discarded, betrayed by the very people I'd trusted. I wasn't just a developer anymore, I was a cautionary tale. The guy who once led the team, now left in the dust. On the way home, I replayed every conversation, every missed sign. Was I blind? Did I ignore the warning signals? I felt anger burning inside me, mixed with a crushing weight of despair. How could something I loved so much be taken away so easily? That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the glow of my old laptop. The code was still there, lines and lines of logic and creativity, but it felt meaningless now. I wondered if I was done, if this was the end of my story. But even in that dark moment, a small spark refused to die. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning of something else. The first few days after getting fired felt like a strange, empty silence. No emails, no calls, just a quiet that pressed down on me harder than any code bug ever had. My phone sat untouched on the kitchen table, and the world outside went on without noticing I was suddenly gone. I wandered through the apartment trying to fill the space with noise, TV shows, music, but nothing stuck. The loudest thing was the voice inside my head, repeating every question I couldn't answer. Was I really that replaceable? Had I failed? Did all those years mean nothing? I scrolled through job boards, but the listings felt distant, like they were meant for someone else. I wasn't just unemployed, I was lost. The routines that once grounded me, morning coffee, code reviews, sprint planning, were gone, replaced by uncertainty and quiet dread. Some nights I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of isolation. Friends reached out, but I didn't have the energy to explain. Pride held me back from admitting how much the fall hurt. I wasn't just grieving a job, I was grieving a part of myself. But in the darkest moments, something unexpected began to happen. The silence forced me to listen, to myself, my doubts, and my dreams. I realized I had spent so long defining myself by this job, by the title, that I forgot who I was beyond the code. Slowly, the anger that had been simmering beneath the surface started to shift. It wasn't just anger at the company or the people who pushed me out. It was anger at the part of me that stayed silent, that didn't fight harder, that let things slip away. It wasn't easy, it still is. But I began to see this silence not as an end, but as a pause, a chance to breathe, to rebuild, to rethink what mattered. Little did I know the story wasn't over, far from it. Just when I thought I could let the past fade, the phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated before answering, but curiosity won. On the other end was Anya, a former teammate I trusted, a voice from the inside. She didn't waste time on small talk. "Things are falling apart," she said, her voice tight with frustration. "The code base is a mess, bugs everywhere, clients complaining. No one knows what's going on." I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and dread. Satisfaction that they realized what I'd warned them about, dread that the damage was worse than I imagined. Anya told me about rushed patches, incomplete features, and frantic meetings with no clear direction. The people who replaced me lacked the deep understanding needed to keep the system stable. She said the team was overwhelmed and morale was sinking fast. I wanted to jump in to fix everything from the outside, but I held back. This wasn't just about code. It was about trust, the trust they had already broken when they let me go without a real reason. Still, hearing the truth shook something loose inside me. The frustration I'd buried deep started bubbling to the surface. They had underestimated the work behind the scenes, the late nights, the problem-solving, the careful design decisions. And now they were paying the price. That call was a turning point. I realized that this wasn't just a company issue, it was personal. Not because I wanted my job back, but because I cared. Because I built more than code, I built a part of their future. And if the code base was crashing, maybe it was a sign, a challenge, a chance to prove that I wasn't done yet. A few days after my call with Anya, I got another unexpected message. This time it was from David, the CTO who once trusted me, the man who had been the closest to a mentor during my rise. He didn't waste time with pleasantries either. His message was blunt. "We need you back. The system is falling apart. No one else can fix this mess." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding in a way I hadn't felt since the firing. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let the company deal with the chaos they'd created. But another part, the part that had built those systems from nothing, it stirred awake. I thought about the pride I'd lost, the trust that had been shattered. Could I walk back into the place that cast me aside? Could I face the people who had doubted me? The offer wasn't just a chance to reclaim my old role. It was a test of my patience, my pride, and my will. I called David back. Our conversation was awkward but honest. He admitted mistakes were made. He needed someone who understood the code, someone who cared enough to fix it. And despite everything, he still believed I was that person. I took a deep breath and agreed, not because I wanted to go back to the old way, but because I saw an opportunity to rewrite my story. But this time, I wasn't coming back as the same man. I had learned too much from the fall. I wasn't just the lead developer anymore, I was someone who had been broken but wasn't broken for good. As I prepared to step back into the office, a new sense of purpose settled in. This wasn't about proving them wrong, it was about proving myself right. Walking back into the office felt like stepping into a world I once knew, but that had shifted beneath my feet. The familiar hum of computers, the clatter of keyboards, it was all there, but different now. I noticed the sideways glances, the hesitant greetings, the unspoken tension. I wasn't sure if they saw me as a savior or a ticking time bomb. I tried to keep my focus on the code. The code base was worse than I expected, fragments of half-finished features, patched up bugs, and a tangled mess where once there had been order. But I wasn't overwhelmed. I saw the patterns, the logic behind the chaos, the places where I could start rebuilding. The team was quieter around me. Some avoided me completely, still unsure how to act around the man they'd pushed out. Others looked hopeful, like maybe this was a fresh start. I could feel the weight of their expectations and their doubts. I didn't promise miracles. I told them I was back to work, not to play politics or dwell on the past. Slowly, I began digging into the worst problems, fixing critical bugs and stabilizing key systems. Every small success helped rebuild not just the code, but a little of the trust I'd lost. But it wasn't just about technical fixes. I started reaching out to the team, asking for their input, listening more than I talked. I realized that this wasn't just my fight anymore, it was ours. Each day was a challenge, but I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope that the company could survive this mess, hope that I could reclaim a part of myself that I thought was gone. Yet even as progress crept in, I knew the biggest test was still ahead, not just in the code, but in whether I could truly move forward. Rebuilding the code was one thing. Rebuilding trust, both in myself and from others, was something entirely different. It took more than just fixing bugs and patching systems. It demanded patience, humility, and a willingness to be vulnerable in front of people I once saw as colleagues and now skeptics. I started by owning up to my mistakes, the ones I hadn't admitted before. There were times when I had pushed too hard, when I'd missed signs or failed to communicate clearly. Admitting those faults wasn't easy, but it broke down walls. The team began to open up, sharing their own struggles and frustrations. Little by little, the atmosphere shifted. Meetings became more collaborative, and I saw sparks of the old camaraderie return. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was progress. I felt the weight of isolation lift, replaced by a fragile but growing connection. More importantly, I was learning to forgive myself. Losing my job had felt like a personal failure, but this journey taught me it was just a chapter, not the whole story. The person who came back wasn't the same man who had left. I was stronger, wiser, and more grounded. Still, the scars remained. I couldn't forget the betrayal or the fear that had crept in during those dark days. But instead of letting those feelings consume me, I channeled them into fuel to work harder, listen better, and lead differently. In time, the Codebase began to stabilize, and so did the team. The chaos that once threatened to sink us was slowly being replaced by order and purpose. And though the journey was far from over, I finally felt like I belonged again. This wasn't just about saving a company or a project. It was about reclaiming my dignity and proving that even when you fall, you can rise, sometimes stronger than before. By the time the dust settled, everything had changed, not just at work, but inside me. The company was on firmer ground, the Codebase more stable than it had been in months. But more than that, I had found a new version of myself. I stopped defining my worth by my title or the approval of others. I learned that even the strongest foundations can crack, but what matters is how you rebuild them. The experience had been brutal, but it stripped away illusions and left me with something real: resilience. I started setting boundaries, speaking up more, and trusting my instincts. The lessons from the fall shaped the way I worked and lived. I was no longer just the lead developer. I was a leader who had faced failure and come through stronger. The team respected me again, not because I held a title, but because I showed up fully, flaws and all. We celebrated small wins together, and I saw a future that wasn't just about code, but about growth, trust, and possibility. Looking back, getting fired was the hardest thing that ever happened to me, but also the most necessary. It pushed me to confront my fears and question what success really meant. Now, when I look at that old desk, I don't see loss. I see a starting point, a place where I fell, yes, but more importantly, where I rose. The crash of the Codebase was a wake-up call, and in answering it, I found my true direction.